neglected the opportunity to meet other people, and I'll give you a story, a quick story about how, you know, it's people meeting other people that's really how things get done. And we have some friends from Austria who may wander in at some point. They're here visiting us this weekend. And she had called me the night of the election. And so I thought, oh, how great, Poetry in Motion just arrived. I was just getting ready to rhyme. She said that a columnist in Vienna did an article that he approached each of the campaigns, this was during the primary season, and said, how can I help? And McCain and Hillary sent a form for a contribution. Yeah. And Obama said, find 20 people who care about the same things you do, and send a contribution. That's what, so I started out as a journalist, and I always had a progressive activist slant, and one of my teachers had said, you can be completely fair in how you cover something, but what you choose to cover, what you choose to put your energy in, you put your most energy in pitching the stories that you think are most important, and then they interest your editor. That's one way of being an activist. And then when I worked in arts nonprofits for a long time, I was president of Artist Space for 6 years, which is one of the oldest of the alternative spaces for emerging artists. And the woman helping me in the dining room is a young artist who just moved here from Chicago, and she's looking for work to supplement her art making. So if you meet her, find out what she can do. And then I have now morphed into, I've been writing poetry for the last couple of years. And so I sort of thought that I was leaving my journalism activism world. But I've been delighted to see how, you know, when you reach 50 years on this planet, you start to, your different parts of your lives can intersect. And that's what I'm hoping will happen today. And I highlighted a couple of issues that I think you guys will be interested in. For starters, a friend of mine wrote this book, two friends of mine, The Genius of America, How the Constitution Saved Our Country and Why It Can Again. And I think it's a very thoughtful, and this was really before Obama, on why all Americans, particularly younger Americans, really need to know what's at stake. And then Roosevelt House is a new public policy institute at Hunter College that'll be opening sometime in '09. The new president, Jennifer Rapp, when she got there, she found out that that Hunter owned the Roosevelt House that was given to the Roosevelts when they were newlyweds, the one where the mother-in-law had access on every floor. Not surprisingly, Eleanor probably wanted to wander out of the house with regularity. And she became a great friend of Hunter College that existed throughout her life. When this new president, 5 or 6 years ago, when she came there, the house was in great disrepair. She was told we can't afford to renovate it. She thought we can't afford not to renovate it. It's such a legacy. And this too was happening long before Obama. And I think probably everyone here will want to get on their mailing list because they've already been having fantastic forums. They did a partnership with the Aspen Institute while they're in construction. And they would have things like when they were doing the Constitution and the presidency, they had a sitting Supreme Court Justice, Linda Greenhouse doing the forum, and Sandra Day O'Connor. And they were really casual type conversations that happened to take place on a stage. And they're putting a lot of emphasis in training undergraduates, not just graduates. More public policy institutes have a more graduate focus. And so there's plenty of brochures here and around. And if you want to get on their mailing list for the lectures and forums, that's there as well. Which brings me to Poetry in Motion, which I see as an example of what can be done when people just sort of get together. From my poetry workshop and from other poetry lovers and people who are involved in a couple of things, we found out that Poetry in Motion was the MTA, which actually, since we have the head of the Poetry Society here, I'll let her give the brief pitch on what's happened. Yeah, please come up here. This is Alice Quinn.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Well, this program has been in the city's subways and buses for 15 years. It came here because people, one of them, it wasn't Lee, but the former head of the MTA was on the Underground in London and saw the poetry program and thought it'd be great and called up my predecessor at the Poetry Society. It's been going for 15 years. I mean, there are many young people in the city who have never known a time when there were not poems for free to look at and to memorize on the subways and buses. Well, last April, an executive at the MTA made a kind of whimsical decision. She's a nice person, I like her. I flattered myself that she liked me, but she's a little tough, and she wanted to put a swatch of Hamlet up on the subway. And that would have been perfectly fine with me, because I consider that blank verse. But one of her colleagues said to her, well, you can't do that. That won't pass muster because it's prose. And so she decided, and a friend of Kathy's wrote an article about it in the Times, Jim Dwyer, which is in this packet that I have. It was a really helpful article. She said, well, I thought, well, why not prose in motion? And she decided to, call it train of thought. And you've probably seen it on the subways and buses. And actually, I think the quotations are well chosen. But, the art of the essay is the art of the whole essay. It's not a little swatch of it. And, we worked really hard to find really gorgeous poems by Paul Laurence Dunbar and Dickinson and Langston Hughes and Galway Canal that really, small, wonderful poems, 16 lines or fewer. And so anyhow, right now, we have a lot of lines in to Lee Sanders, and we're going to have a meeting with him in a week or two, and you've put some lines into him, and I've written to Barnes & Noble, who subsidized that program for its printing costs, and it's a very bad time for Barnes & Noble, but they are still spending the money on the prose. So I said, wrote to him and said, am I wrong in thinking that you could wave a magic wand and simply say to the MTA, I prefer the poems? So I hope he'll do that. But in the interim, because I don't think that they'll let go of that program for a whole year, because that would be backing down from a commitment that they made to the prose and to Columbia University, who's helping them choose the prose. So in the interim, what we want to do is put poems up on 50% of the buses, just to get it going so that people can see it and remember how much they like it. And the whole cost of that for 12 poems in the course of the year is $21,000. So we've raised 11. That's not too bad. And I'm looking to raise another 10 in the next month or so we can pledge the... And I think once it's up and people see it, I mean, we've already been flooded with emails and everything, but I think the pressure will build and it'll be a good public relations push.
I'm using this as an example, not only because it's near and dear to my heart, but just sort of how this was something that was made, a basically independent decision in government. In fact, they were told to come in to find out about the expansion of poetry in motion, and the expansion was putting up prose and taking out poetry. There would have been no problem. And they said, well, no problem. Well, you can still do it. You just have to pay for it. It's a mere $2 million, to continue it.
They really did refer to it as an expansion, because they're going to include one poem. And the program is all around the country. It's in
New York. New York owns the trademark with the Poetry Society in New York. It started in New York. It's sort of it's a New York treasure in a way, but this might be an opportunity where just if Lee Sanders gets 10 letters from New York owns the trademark with